My name is Maura Sparks. I am an Eagle Scout candidate with Crossroads of America Pathfinder District, and I am here today to talk with political law enforcement leaders about crime prevention in our communities through Crime Stoppers of Central Indiana. Here beside me is my co-host, Abdul Hakim Shabazz. Mr. Shabazz is an attorney, award-winning political writer, and television commentator. He has been covering and writing with state and local government in Indiana since 2004, and before that in Illinois for nearly 25 years. So, Abdul, I introduced you. So is there anything that you want to tell the audience before we start?
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate you on working towards your Eagle Scout. You're doing a really, really good job with the things we got lined up for today. And so I think it'll be really good and really informative. So that's kind of point number one. But number two, I also want to thank the good folks here at Edge Media Studios for helping us out and helping us make all this happen. So they're really, really like scouting, really concerned about the community. So we're going to have a good show today.
All right. Thank you. And thank you, Edge Media, for letting us come in and record this. So before we start, I have a couple questions about what exactly you do. So what inspired you to be so involved in crime prevention in our city?
Well, basically, I've always loved covering local government, local politics. So whether it was in Illinois or here or other places. And so crime and quality of life are always big issues, because they go to where people want to live, what resources can have to spend on police and courts and jail. And also, you want people to be safe and people to have happy, productive lives. So writing about crime and covering crime really helps me make all that happen.
What is your involvement in the community centers that try to bring people out of crime?
I'm more of an observer of the human condition, so I kind of write about what's going on, the good and the bad, and so because you need sort of both to make everything happen and happen right. So when police they get the bad guy or they come with a new program that works, I write about it, and also sometimes when some not so nice things happen in our community, you got to write about that. You got to take the good with the bad, unfortunately.
Yeah. So why should people support nonprofits like Crime Stoppers?
Because we're all in this together. And so whether they live on the north side, south side, east side, west side, downtown, sort of on the other side of 465, crime impacts you because it impacts your quality of life. And so supporting institutions, like Crime Stoppers, like Impd and them, Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Force, goes a long way to making our community better and safer.
Good. Okay. Are there any questions that you would like to ask me before we start?
No, you're going to have a really good time and a really good job. So just take a deep breath and let's rock and roll.
Okay, let's do this. So thank you, Abdul, for that insight about how we talk about what we will be talking about in general today. So let's get started with the interviews. The first person we will be talking today is Dan Rosenberg, the Director of Crime Stoppers of Central Indiana. Welcome, everyone, to my Eagle Project to bring awareness to crime prevention and communities through Crime Stoppers of Central Indiana. Here in the studio with us today is none other than the Director of Crime Stoppers of Central Indiana, Dan Rosenberg.
Hello, how are we doing?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Thanks for doing this, by the way.
You're very welcome. I love Crime Stoppers and I love what they do for the community. So this was a big thing and got me really excited to do.
Well, the way we think about crime prevention at Crime Stoppers is it takes a community, right? Mm-hmm. And so you're stepping in and you're helping us out as a part of the community, and we need people like you. So we really appreciate what you're doing for us.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to talk a little about you.
Okay.
So Sergeant Rosenberg is a local who was born and raised in the north side of Indianapolis. He is currently the Director of Crime Stoppers of Central Indiana, and he's been the director for 3 years now.
That's true.
All right. So Abdul, do you have anything to say?
No, Dan, always good to have you here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for being here, by the way. Thanks for being a part of this.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, love the Boy Scouts, love the Girl Scouts, love Crime Stoppers. Anything that makes my life easier, I'm all for.
All right. So can you explain a little about Crime Stoppers and what exactly it does?
Sure. So the big thing to know about Crime Stoppers is that it's been around for about 40 years. In that amount of time, we've never had a tipster that we've given up an identification on or anything like that. One of the important parts about our program is that it's anonymous. So the whole program is built around this idea that there is information out in our community that can help our law enforcement partners make our communities a better place and a safer place. And so what we do is we help get that information from the community, and then we get it to our law enforcement partners. And then sometimes if there's an arrest, we pay out a little bit of money. But I'll let you in on a secret. Over 90% of the people who call our program, and we're talking thousands of people a year, over 90% of those people, when they mark the box to submit their tip about whether they want money or not for that tip, they mark no.
Oh, wow.
And the reason for that is that they just really want to have a better neighborhood. And so I think that that's a really important thing to know about this program is, yes, we offer money, but it's not about snitching.
It's not the importance, it's the money. It's about making our community a safer place for everybody.
That's right. That's right. And that's what our tipsters know.
So help us out. Just walk us through the process. At the 30,000 foot level, somebody calls, what happens?
So, well, there's 3 different ways that you can submit a tip. We have a website. You can go. It's got a lot of the drop-down boxes. You can do it all yourself. Put in the information that you have. That's one way to do it. We also have a mobile app, which is the mobile P3 app. You can submit a tip that way, and it's kind of the same idea, right? It's the drop-down boxes, that kind of thing. And then we also have an office where we have our trained operators who are going to fill it out basically for you. So if you call on the phone, we have trained people who are going to know the right questions to ask. They're going to get that information from you that they know will make a successful investigation and still keep you safe, right? Because that's an important part a lot of times, making sure that the information that we're providing to law enforcement doesn't identify the tipster themselves. So what we're going to do is we're going to get all that information from you. It then goes into our system, and we give you a tip ID, and you can come back at any point in time as long as you have that tip ID. You can add more information. You can change information. So as that investigation is going along, you can continue to help us out. Now, what we do is that we then take that tip, we send it with the tip ID to your local law enforcement. That investigator is going to look it all over. Sometimes they're going to ask me, hey, the pink car, is that a Ford? Is that a Chevy? I may put additional questions back into the tip. That tipster can go back in and look at it. But I'm never going to have that tipster's phone number. I'm never going to know their address, their name, anything like that. So the way that it works is we have to have a tipster that is involved, is active, and is being a part of the process. And that's, like I said, we are creating communities that can actively be a part of solving their own problems.
So here's a weird question, and if you can't fully answer it, I totally, completely understand. Let's say I call in the Crime Stoppers, I put my tip in, lo and behold, there's an arrest. How do I get paid if I'm anonymous?
Well, and I'm happy to. So we work with some different business partners, and those businesses make sure that there is a particular area. What we do is we give you a code name and a password. You go to that prescribed area at an exact point in time. You provide your code name and your password. I mean, this is like, 1950s Cold War stuff going on. You got to love this, right?
The dog barks at midnight.
That's right. That's right. And what we do is we literally have someone who hands an envelope. Nobody who works for my program ever puts eyes on a tipster. So if I'm, if Judge Cerdo calls me in, gives me a warrant, subpoenas me in, and I gotta talk about the program, I can honestly look at him and say, I've never met a tipster. I don't have that information, Judge, and that's the truth. So we then give them cash. That is also why we never give more than $1,000. In the state of Indiana, if you give someone more than $1,000, you got to provide a tax information. So once again, it's all about keeping that person anonymous.
And that makes communities feel safer and the individuals in the communities.
I think it does make them feel safer, but it actually keeps them safer. And that's the important part, right? So what was their motivation for calling us? There had to be something, a story behind that. And we want them not only to feel safer, we want them to be safer if they've gone that extra step. If they can't call law enforcement and they feel like it's necessary to call us, let's actually keep them safe.
So, why don't people report crimes to the police?
Well, I think that historically there's a lot of different reasons, right? There's many places all over the country where historically they may not have the best relationship with law enforcement. I think it's good that we acknowledge that. So I think that there's a gap there that Crime Stoppers can step in and help with. But I also think that, in American culture, even outside of historically, but in American culture, we build stories and theatrics and entertainment around this idea that the bad guy has superhuman powers and they're going to get you.
And they're always going to come back if you try to contact the police.
Right. Yeah. They're hiding under your bed. They know everything you do. Right. And so it's a scary thing. And so whether it's real or not, it doesn't make any difference, because if I feel like I can't be in my own street, if I feel like I'm not safe in my own home, I need something, a tool that helps me provide and communicate with my local law enforcement.
What do you think the tomorrow of Crime Stoppers is? What do you think it's going to look like in 10 years or 15 years from now?
Well, my crystal ball says, no, I continue to hope that we are stepping in and helping those that feel like they need that kind of help in the community. But I also hope that there will be less need for it. I mean, to be honest with you, the most successful thing that could happen is lower crime rates.
If you don't need the anonymous tip line anymore.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people ask the police, what's your perfect day? The police will tell you their perfect day is doing nothing, because then there's no crime, right? They're the one profession that you don't want to have to do their job. That's a good thing. But Crime Stoppers is very much like that. And I hope that we get to a point where it's, just really about, hey, maybe Joe's got a warrant and he's hiding in the garage. But I think right now we're there filling in a need for communities that need to feel supported.
How many tips do you guys average a week, a month, a year, or does it vary? And noting too that we just got through COVID-19, so that probably played a role in the number of calls that you guys received over the past 15 months and some change.
It did. And so I've been doing this for about 3 years, right? And I think I came in with some presumptions of what the program was. One of the most interesting things for me about this program is that I had been telling people for years and years, it's filling a need, it's filling, people want something, they're getting provided a service. Well, sure enough, what happened with COVID was all of a sudden we got COVID tips. So we had a spike originally because people used our program to call in because they didn't feel safe telling somebody, you shouldn't be having a party right now, or I don't want to go talk to this person about wearing their mask. But it filled a need. Now, that's not a crime. It wasn't a crime. It was an infraction. It was a procedural thing. But it's still something that we can help with. So we get somewhere in the average of anywhere from about 600 to 800 original tips So that's the very first tip coming in. And then we may do anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 follow-ups over the course of a month. And what that averages out to is anywhere between probably 20 and 30,000 contacts a year. And some of those are, my neighbor plays their music too loud. and then others are as serious as,
my neighbor played his music too loud to cover the gunshots.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right. We've had those, quite literally. So all kinds of needs filled.
Why is it important for businesses and people to give to Crime Stoppers?
Well, I think a lot of people don't know that we're a nonprofit. We're not government. We're not run. We don't have a fancy shirt that we sell for big money. We really rely on our community, our business partners, our other folks, people at ARP, people at Walgreens, people, the Pacers. We have all these fantastic sponsors. We have a shredded event every year where people from the community come and shred documents and recycle their old electronics, technology recyclers. The list goes on and on and on. We have fantastic partners. And without those partners, it really changes everything. I go to a national conference every year, and I can tell you right now there are Crime Stoppers programs out there that are quite literally an old school answering machine. And that's it. And they have all kinds of problems. It is the people in our community who are willing to give us a little bit of money. It is the businesses that are willing to give us a little bit of help. It is the young ladies who are going out for their Eagle Badge, who think of us and help us out. And that's what makes us a success. We're a reflection of you. That's our success.
So Crime Stoppers, is it a nationwide business? Is it how far do you guys go?
We are worldwide.
Worldwide? Wow.
Yeah. No. So Crime Stoppers is kind of like a franchise. There are lots of nonprofits that subscribe to the bigger USA Crime Stoppers program. And then USA Crime Stoppers is a part of an even bigger conglomerate, which is the International Crime Stoppers program. And there are Crime Stoppers programs in Germany and South America and all over Asia. So I think the idea isn't just an American. It started here, but it's really not an American thing. It's a human thing. It speaks to people everywhere, all over the world.
We all want that outlet to make our community and us safer.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the need is different from place to place, but I think there's still a need.
All right. Well, that's all my questions. Abdul, do you have any more questions?
How do you distinguish between the real legitimate tips of, someone committed a crime versus, all right, my neighbor's being a jerk, I'm going to call Crime Stoppers?
So, and this is a fantastic part about, so I was involved in law enforcement. And to me, everything was a report. Didn't matter how trivial I thought it was. At Crime Stoppers, everything is a tip. It doesn't matter to me how trivial it is. One of the things that we are doing at Crime Stoppers is we're relaying information. We're not making information, and we're not investigating information because we're not the police. So if the dog pooped on the lawn or my neighbor's stinky socks are on my car, it doesn't matter because law enforcement who knows their communities, who knows their offenders, who is working in those particular neighborhoods may see something that I think is trivial and say, nope, that's the piece of the puzzle I was missing.
Because you never know what scenario that is a part of.
That's right. That's right. So we don't assume. Does that always make every police officer happy? Does that make everybody in my office happy even all the time? No, because I make them send everything. So be assured, if you're a tipster, no matter how insignificant even you think it is,
It's going to go somewhere.
it's going to go somewhere. Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you, Sergeant Rosenberg, for helping me on this campaign. And thank you, Crime Stoppers, for being my beneficiary for my Eagle Project. When we come back, we will be interviewing Maura Britt, the president of the Edna Martin Christian Center. Hello again, everyone. If you just joined, I'm Maura Sparks, and beside me is Abdul Hakim Shabazz. We are here today talking about crime prevention in our communities in support of Crime Stoppers. The guest we are speaking to right now is Maura Britt, the president of the Edna Martin Christian Center. So Mr. Britt became the 6th president/CEO of the Edna Martin Christian Center on January 1st, 2020. Prior to his directorship, he was the deputy executive director leading the Leadership and Legacy Campus, their intergenerational hub for youth and seniors, where he oversaw the day-to-day operations and also led the center's campus capital development strategies. Prior to joining EMCC in April 2009, Mr. Britt worked as a site manager for the Princeton Review, a supplemental education service tutoring agency, where he managed programs serving over 300 youth in Indianapolis public schools. Okay, so my first question for you is, what made you get involved in helping people in our community and crime prevention?
Sure. Well, Maura, first off, I'd like to say thanks for the invite. I always love the opportunity just to discuss, issues of the day, especially with, very capable, intelligent young people who really want to affect some change. So thank you so much for the invite.
You're very welcome.
To answer your question, I don't know if I recall a time where focus on community and service and playing a certain role in community uplift or positive development has ever been a part of my life. I've been fortunate and blessed to have 2 parents that are educators. One parent who was focused particularly on criminal justice as a former chair of the Criminal Justice Department at Ivy Tech in South Bend. Really culturally conscious and community-minded family members in addition. And so it was, and a strong faith-based foundation where service was just something that was inherent and embedded in our day-to-day walk, right? So having the opportunity to be able to serve, it just seems like it's something that is not just a responsibility, but also a privilege. And that's just something that has been embedded in me as a very young person. And I'm just thankful for the opportunity to continue to do so.
All right. Another question is, what impact does your shelter have on the children in our community?
Sure. Well, the Edna Martin Christian Center certainly prides itself on not just the programs that we provide our youth, but our comprehensive approach to community empowerment as a whole. We are in our 80th year. Very thankful to be able to serve the community over that span. I have not been there that entire time, but I'm certainly happy to have been a part for the 11 years that I've been at the center. Specifically, our programs as it relates to you. Direct programs include 2 high-quality Level 3 child care centers serving young people ages 6 weeks all the way up to 5 years, preparing them for opportunities for the K-12 education landscape. But we don't just stop there. We make sure that we are providing ample out-of-school time supports year-round for students that continue on with us even post their early childhood experience. Through our Martindale Brightwood Education Zone, we're also providing supplemental supports in addition to our direct out-of-school time programs for families to make sure that we're doing building social capital, providing resources and supports to ensure family stability, creating greater connection with the schools that we're blessed to serve, along with the students that we're able to serve, and also, again, just making sure that we create long-term generational relationship with our students so that, one, our expectation is that we're able to cultivate the talent that we believe is, really that has a lot of potential in our community, but cultivating their skill sets, building them in a way to where they'll ultimately thrive, but stay in the community and continue to transform us in a positive way. So we're able to annually serve over 500 students through various services. And again, as I said earlier, it's just a privilege to do so.
Ryder, let me ask you, when you look at our whole sort of our crime sort of infrastructure, we have the police, we have the prosecutors, we have the defense attorneys. Mm-hmm. What role do organizations like yours play in our crime prevention infrastructure?
Sure. Well, I think the diverse range of needs that the community has. I think Edna Martin looks at itself as a particular vehicle that is part of something that needs to be much, much more comprehensive, right? For us, we know the realities of the fact that there is still a disconnect with the criminal justice system, and particularly the individuals that we seek to serve. We know that our programs tend to be more preventive in nature, right? So that we are we're tapping into our families before they get into situations where there is some type of negative criminal justice interaction, but also utilizing the credibility we have as a longstanding organization, the direct work. We let our work stand for itself. Although we're certainly capable and willing to stand on certain positions, we let the work kind of speak for itself, and that creates a certain level of credibility that may help bridge certain gaps that are going to be absolutely necessary if we're going to, really transform our trajectory in a way to where the criminal justice system actually realizes its the role that we hope as citizens, that type of synergy that is going to be necessary for individuals to completely buy in.
All right. In your opinion, why do you think people are scared to report crime?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a really complicated question, right? I can tell you, my own personal opinion, but obviously a lot of it is rooted in historical context, right? Mm-hmm. You cannot, I don't think, you certainly can't ignore the fact that historically the disconnect and in many cases the viable distrust or the justifiable distrust that many marginalized and underserved individuals in our community have toward the criminal justice system is again justified. There is a lack of trust that if individuals report crime, that they will be addressed in a manner that really does get to the justice that they're looking for, but also that in a way to where law enforcement and individuals that are responsible for resolving these issues are absolutely protecting the individuals that are brave or courageous enough to come to the table and actually report things that they see, right? I think part of that culture has bred or part of that, the disservice or the injustices that we've seen and disparities in the criminal justice level have created a mentality that does, have to think about, potential retribution, thinks about because of that distrust, what is the incentive and motivation for individuals who don't really trust those who are responsible for resolving criminal activity, that they'll be taken care of. So I think that plays a pretty heavy role in it, and it's a generational problem that we all have to find smart ways to address and alleviate.
How do you work to build trust between communities, law enforcement, particularly with the for lack of a better term, sort of the climate that we're in right now?
Yeah. Well, so again, obviously this this is a historical issue, but it's made even more timely given all the things that we've experienced over the past year. It seems like there's some more urgency, but this has always been a really significant issue for us to address collectively. I think, we have to be honest, apolitical in our dialogue, really address the fact that there are, respect people's truths based on their experiences or their family's experiences as it relates to the justice system. Really acknowledge the fact that there are certain biases that are still there that still need to be dealt with, but at the same time, we really try to highlight and continue to try to work on those opportunities that we can help relieve some of that bias, right? By continuing to try to promote opportunities for people of color and individuals from marginalized communities to take greater roles, whether that is, working as officers or prosecutors or, but continually trying to engage and getting out of our comfort zones to have those conversations. That's hard, right? But it's necessary. And, I just tend to be one of those individuals that, believe it is possible. And that goes back to your earlier point, Abdul, about the importance of all of us, a community center, a church, school, parents, families, all this social capital, really bringing our collective energy to the table so that we can at least stimulate, these hard conversations, because they just have to continue to happen.
Because we have to work as a unit, not one school or one program or a church can make they can make a small impact, but as a unit, it'll be a greater impact.
No, that's absolutely correct, Maura. I mean, our approach to community work is a collective impact, right? Again, Edna Martin Christian Center has been blessed to grow and be a pretty large vehicle of positive change in the Martindale-Brightwood community in 46218, but we even know at our greatest capacity, we can only do so much. So we need to coalesce and utilize our position to help build capacity around, neighbors and families and other stakeholders so that we can see the positive change that we believe is capable. Because one thing we definitely believe in is the talent and the individuals in our community. We just need to make sure that they're provided access to those opportunities.
So this might be an open-ended question, but how has the Edna Martin Christian Center impacted the crime rate in the community?
So that is, so I don't know how I would quantify that, except to say that I'm confident that our programs, because of the outcomes that we've been able to see, whether it's access to employment opportunities, whether it is that full pipeline of education supports and services, whether it is the sustainability supports that we're providing families so they don't have to seek other options, right? I mean, just providing that level of continuity, stability, especially in this really rough time as we're still navigating the pandemic, I believe has a positive impact on the crime statistics in our neighborhood, right? I mean, but again, everything that we do is trying to be preventive in measure, or preventive by extension. So,
okay. So, why do kids get involved in crime in your area, in our area?
So it does speak to, in my opinion, Maura, it speaks to a broader issue of, again, equity and access. Like I said, I stand very firmly on my confidence in the ability and the talent of the individuals that are in our community, right? I just believe very firmly that by affording them greater levels of access to opportunities, whether it's high quality education and options that do meet their best needs, right? By providing, again, sustainability supports, you know what I mean? So families can, create, long-term trajectories that will get our young people into positive opportunities, whether it is connection to employment opportunities, leadership opportunities, such as Boy Scouts, right? Such as the Scouts. We actually are pleased to have a troop over at Edna Martin as well, but just opportunities that also provide them a means to cultivate the talent that's there, however they need to do it within the community, I think is what will continue to help us reduce the desires or the choices that young people would tend to make when those opportunities don't exist.
Okay. So how, other than churches and schools, what can individuals in the community do to help prevent crime or help people lean toward your center or to the anonymous tip line?
Or help mitigate, the crime issue in their communities?
Sure. Well, in a general sense, we seek to, if there's one thing I've learned about Edna Martin or Martindale-Brightwood in particular, is that for all of its its complexities, right? I mean, even the difference between Martindale Brightwood, it is still very territorial, right? There is a level of ownership there where people are like, we're seeing, we're dealing with things like development that may lead to displacement and things like that. And our folk are starting to galvanize around, a greater level of ownership. Like, this is our community. Well, if that is in fact the case, then it needs to translate not only to voicing your power as it relates to some of this other development, but to be vocal in terms of trying to address what is currently, conditions that are impacting us. And that voice needs to be complemented by action and activity. There are so many different assets and resources that organizations seek, that are looking for individuals who want to just find opportunities to continue to serve, right? I mean, I get that, some people may be intimidated by going outside of their own comfort zones to help serve. But again, places like Edna Martin, places like Boys Club, places like schools really do seek out opportunities for individuals to mentor, to come and learn, to come and serve, just to come and, really get us back to a certain level of community, right? That again, I know is there. You know what I mean? Our community really does have this ownership piece that, for its pluses and minuses, it's our neighborhood. So let's go ahead and take the next step and, just complement that with, again, voice, with action, with activity. And it's coming, but we need to step it up significantly.
They also give the environment of that safety outlet. So when kids in their community feel like they're going to be put out or disbanded in their community, they can go to a school or the Boys and Girls Club or the Edna Martin Christian Center, and they have that outlet to feel safe.
Oh, yes. So, and that's the other thing, right? I mean, our organizations have to make sure that we are getting beyond our doors too, right? And sometimes that leads to, uncomfortable situations, right? It's easy to stay within the walls of Leadership and Legacy Campus or 2605, our other site, and just say, okay, you guys got to come to us. You know what I mean? And we'll try to find. No, we have to make sure that folk know that we're accessible, that we're open. We serve the community, right? It is not the other way around. So we have to likewise, kind of walk the talk. We do believe that our services do have a positive impact, but we also have a responsibility to make sure that everyone knows that they have assets in the community to take advantage of.
That's another way, because Crime Stoppers is an anonymous tip line, so that gives the people another outlet to feel safe, so they won't be persecuted in their community or anything like that, too.
Well, even that, right? I mean, and I think that goes back to continual education, continual trust building, because you can, there are individuals that, even though, we articulate the fact that you can report things anonymously, or you can, that's not going to crack the surface, because that distrust, that level of either dissatisfaction or just this generational piece that again that is justifiable, right? I mean, there's root causes for this. Is just something that, like I said, it's not going to change overnight. But that shouldn't stop us from continuing to find ways to tap in, such as
that
having
spark
these conversations.
is starting to happen.
It is continuing. It's a slow process. It is a slow process.
All right, Abdul, do you have anything else?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
You did a
All
really
right.
good job.
Well,
You did a great job, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Britt, again, for coming in to talk today about crime prevention in our communities. Next up, we're going to talk to the Indiana Superior Court Judge, David Cerdo. Hello again, everyone, to my campaign to bring awareness to crime prevention in communities through Crime Stoppers of Central Indiana. Right now in the studio, I am with Indiana Superior Court Judge David Cerdo. Judge Cerdo is a judge of the Marion County Superior Court in Indiana. He assumed office in 2007. His current term ends on December 31st, 2026. Prior to his judicial appointment, Judge Cerdo served as a legal counsel to the Indiana Department of Natural Resources. So, Judge Cerdo, I have a couple questions to ask you today. The first one is, what was the purpose of the Protective Order Pro Bono project?
Maura, I'm delighted to be with you, and congratulations on being a Life Scout already.
Thank you.
I'm delighted to talk with you about how we prevent crime in our community. But to put it in context, domestic violence is a common issue in Indianapolis, I'm sorry to say, as it is in so many other communities. And all of us have an opportunity to intervene and help abate it. You know, you hear talk about Smokey the Bear, only you can prevent forest fires. Well, it's true. All of us can be part of the solution when it comes to domestic violence too. But many people, especially in an emergency situation, don't know where to start. And the Protective Order Pro Bono Project was created to help victims of domestic violence get legal protection, especially by obtaining what's called a personal protection order. That protective order, as it's often called, is designed to keep people apart, and it puts all the responsibility on one individual to make sure that the parties are kept separate. That way we know whose responsibility it is for them not to be together, not riding in a car, not eating at the Denny's, not fighting on the lawn, not engaged in domestic violence. But by separating the parties, very often you can diffuse the situation, and that order is issued by a court, often on an emergency basis, to help keep those individuals separated, especially during a period of crisis. If it's issued at the request of one party, called ex parte because only one party is participating, then there will be a hearing scheduled after that to make it a permanent order, meaning after hearing and for as long as it's issued. And the Protective Order Pro Bono Project helps individuals obtain those orders on an emergency basis and then go to a hearing and maybe make it more permanent after that.
Okay. Another question is the significance that the project will what is the significance that the project will have on the domestic violence community?
Especially if you're in an emergency situation, unless you're very well trained, which is why we as scouts really prize that be prepared motto. It can be really hard to keep your head, make a plan, and see it through, especially if you're unsure whether you're safe, the people you care about are safe, and whether that's going to continue. The Protective Order Pro Bono Project helps intervene, again, at that moment of crisis when people don't know exactly what to do, and helps them create a safety plan and then see it through by getting these orders for protection to help keep them safe. That preparation they have, the calm coolness that we look for lawyers to express because they have some distance from a problem and a good perspective on how to address it safely, really does help an individual in crisis figure out where to go. And the Protective Order Pro Bono Project, both when it was first founded and in its recent transition, really is well positioned to help people in crisis get from a bad place to a better one, even if they can't get from a bad place to perfect.
Because it puts that wedge between the abuser and the victim of the abuse.
Yes, ma'am, and that's the idea. Even if there's been a misunderstanding, a medication error, a mental health crisis, or just plain violence in cycles, that distance between the two can very often help diffuse the situation and make it easier, especially for members of the community who are well positioned to assist, to intervene effectively.
Because a big issue that we have with domestic violence is that the person being abused either is too scared to leave because they feel like the abuse is going to be even stronger, or they don't know how.
All too common. And I'm a judge. I've been on the bench for 14 years now. I can describe domestic violence to you. I can even help interrupt it, but I don't understand it. And that's really the difficulty, especially when two or a few individuals are involved in a particular domestic violence situation. It can be really hard for anybody to understand it, including the people who are stuck in it. But very often, if we can get people separated, if we can talk more about what normal looks like in a community and set higher expectations, we have a chance of interrupting that cycle, but no guarantee. Very often, it won't shock you when I say one of the most dangerous police calls is for police officers to go to a domestic violence crisis.
Because they don't know what's going to happen in that
Of course
scenario.
not. And once they get there, it may be that now there's a new enemy, and it's the police officer instead of the people who called or the people perpetrating violence. So even in a moment of crisis, it can be difficult for the people involved in it to understand and diffuse. But as a community, we have an obligation to try, especially when we're asked to.
Judge, so a question for you. We look at the domestic violence that the courts have to deal with. How much of that is partially responsible for the broader crime issue, broader crime problem?
In my experience, Abdul, there are three things someone who's on the bench absolutely must know about. The first is substance abuse. The second is mental illness. And the third is domestic violence. Because in my experience, all three of those issues are really tied to the safety of the average citizen, but also to the individuals who continue to repeat the mistakes they've made before. So domestic violence specifically often baffles people. When we talk about the murder rate and people who are dying in domestic violence situations, some people are inclined to throw up their hands and say there's nothing we can do about it. That's false. And anyone who would say that, in my opinion, hasn't really understood not just the crisis, but how we can intervene effectively. We can't throw up our hands. In fact, we have just as good a chance of fighting domestic violence, substance abuse, and mental illness as any other cause if we treat it with seriousness and if we're serious and honest with each other about intervening.
Because it's also a man-made thing.
Yes, ma'am.
It's not a natural disaster that we don't know how to fix or prevent. We just have to make the impact of preventing it.
Yes, but there are lots of different contributors to it, of course. Sometimes we'll see young people who they don't have any experience in romantic relationships. They don't know when things are over. Sometimes they don't know what they deserve. When I served on the domestic violence fatality review team for Marion County, we found a knot of girls in a high school nearby who got together in what almost looked like a support group, and they compared notes about the domestic violence in their relationships because they weren't experienced enough to know that the proper relationship has no domestic violence. And instead they compared notes with each other, and everybody felt bad for Susie because she was in the most violent relationship. But the message they took away from it, well, my relationship must be okay because it's not that. Or it must be pretty good because it's not that. Mm-hmm. Both of which really are what we would say crazy, because crazy, in my experience, is doing things that are bad for you again and again and not really understanding that you can get better than that.
Mm-hmm. So why are people afraid to report domestic violence?
Sometimes, I'm very sorry to tell you, Maura, that it's because they fear the violence is going to be worse. Very often, to maintain that relationship of power and control over someone, domestic violence perpetrator will terrorize that individual. I will kill you if you turn me in. I will kill you or your son if you don't give me your money. I will kill your dog. Right? All these are very common threats, and sometimes people make good on them. One of the most dangerous situations with domestic violence is strangulation. If I'm going to put my hands around your neck and throttle you until you have died and then let go at the very last instant to let you know that I control whether you live or die, is a classic sign of impending fatality in that situation. You are likely to be a victim of murder if that's happening. And this person sitting across from us may well be a murderer if given the chance. So that terror that people use to control each other's behavior very often manifests itself in really dangerous and abnormal behavior, strangulation being a classic one. But if somebody's going to hurt an animal, he or she is very likely to hurt a person too, the evidence tells us. So if I murder your dog to prove to you how serious I am about threatening you, that's insane, but it's a strategy someone who was terrorizing you might use effectively to demonstrate exactly how much power he or she has over you.
Because it's easier to control somebody through terror than being kind.
Yes.
From
it's also easy to say stuff too, right?
Yeah.
We used to get applications for protection orders where a person would report, well, he said he'd burn my house down. Well, finally, we found a guy who did burn down a house. Now, he's dangerous, but he's a man of his word, right? So, of course, he had to be arrested.
Just to know, domestic violence, the perpetrators, is that learned behavior? Is it acquired behavior? How does that? Because obviously we try to look for the root causes of what causes what, so we can sort of mitigate those circumstances down the road. But what causes somebody to put their hands or threaten someone they're supposed to be in love with?
I'm happy to tell you, Abdul, there's not a class you can go to where you learn how to be a great batterer. There are classes we have to try to help interrupt battering behavior, but even they are not nearly as effective as what we know to be true, and that's modeling and being involved in healthy relationships. I wouldn't say that anybody ever lectures, this is a really effective strategy, son. You should really terrorize a woman to get what you want. Some of that does occur, though, I'm sorry to tell you, in less formal ways. Like, see what I did and what I got out of it. sometimes does happen. Very often, it's that behavior you see that's modeled. First, pretending to be normal, and second, getting you what you want. So if that's all you're used to seeing, especially with relationships that are transient, that don't last for any length of time, you might start to think that was normal. On the other side, if you're a lady involved in relationships where men treat you with disrespect and maybe even violence or terrorize you, you might think that's what normal looks like too. So very often you have a group of people who've been treated as victims, and men get used to spotting that and continuing that cycle. Or you have boys who grow up seeing violence and think, because they have watched it happen, that that's a normal way to solve problems and get what you want. Very much learned behavior. There are also genetic influences too. If you're not quite right in the head and you haven't been able to intervene effectively to fix that, you might act differently than we expect you to act until we can intervene effectively. A head injury, for instance, makes you react differently if you're angry, if you're disappointed, than you might otherwise if you had lots of time to think and talk about it. Substance abuse, the same way. Mm-hmm. So we're vigilant for those things, but that behavior is totally abnormal for you and me because we had parents who told us you do not put your hands on a woman. And if you haven't heard that message clearly, especially from fathers or father figures, you might be confused into thinking there are other ways to solve your problems, and that because we're bigger and stronger, we can have our way.
It's all about the community that you're raised up in and your mental state.
There's a lot of that for sure. There are other classic signs of danger. If you're in a house where the man is not the father of the woman who has kids, that very often predicts more likelihood of violence because the man is constantly reminded these are somebody else's kids and they're really annoying me and they're eating my food and they're costing me money. So very often that'll be a point of conflict. If children are present in the home, they sometimes will be in the middle of the disputes. So if a man starts to batter a woman, sons very often want to get involved in that because they don't want to see mom manhandled. So there are a variety of different ways violence can precipitate if we're not committed to stopping it. And frankly, if we don't protect and encourage women the moment they ask for it. And very often people will ask for help and then change their minds. Part of our role as a community is to say, every time you ask, we will help you. And we will encourage you not to set low expectations because you deserve better than that. If you're in a relationship characterized by violence, you deserve better, and we can help you get there.
What societal effect does domestic violence have on our communities?
I'd start first by the effect on children. If we really want to plan for and work toward a better future, we have to make sure our kids are not exposed to violence on a regular basis. First, because we don't want them to think that's an effective way to solve their problems. Second, because my kids are growing up with everybody else's kids, and we want them all to be safe. But we've learned a lot about some of the contributors to criminal justice involvement and what we might call causes of crime because they influence people to act out and against the law, hurting other people. One of them is a whole class of adverse childhood events, ACEs. And what we find is the more of those experiences you've had, Maura, the more likely you are to struggle and stay in poverty, engage in crime, not be good parents yourselves. And we need to intervene sooner. But if you lose a spouse, for instance, a parent, a mom or a dad, if you've been physically or sexually abused, if you've experienced a great deal of trauma, those adverse events make it a lot harder for you to feel safe, to recover, to study, to focus, to keep a job. And all the evidence tells us that the sooner we can intervene in those kinds of situations, the more likely we are to get a healthy individual down the road. We all have problems, it's true. But especially in a circumstance where your life has been defined by problems, where you don't feel safe, where your brain isn't developing in a safe environment, where you're not maybe being fed the right way. If all those things are working on you as a child trying to understand what normal looks like and grow, it's always going to be harder. But domestic violence is one of those adverse childhood events that we just can't have kids exposed to and expect that they're going to grow up to be happy, healthy, productive citizens and spouses.
Going back to the reports, how is Crime Stoppers will be beneficial for the people who are in these situations?
Crime Stoppers is great because it's anonymous. If a person sees something that is abnormal or illegal, something that's dangerous to us or the people involved, as citizens, we have an opportunity and I'd say a responsibility to do something about it. Crime Stoppers is great because it's intended to receive anonymous reports. If you know something about a crime that happened, there might even be a financial reward for you without ever exposing any of that information. The only potential downside I can see to it is very often you need evidence to prove criminal case. And if someone wants to stay anonymous, that can complicate things. But it always is better, in my opinion, to expose wrongdoing to vision. Every time we can see what's going on, whether it's by having a conversation about it, taking pictures of it, by talking honestly about it, that vision of something that's going on, for us to see what's happening, sometimes that alone will put an end to it, either because you fear consequences or shame or any other reason, but in part because we can tell people who are involved in violence, you deserve better, whether you started it or somebody else did.
I'm all out of questions. Abdul, do you have any more questions?
No,
that
we're all
you'd
good,
like
my
to
friend. Good
ask?
to see you, Your Honor.
I'm delighted. It's my privilege to work with and for you, but I stumbled into domestic violence by accident. When I was appointed a judge in 2007, I had the privilege to take a court that 34 other judges didn't want. And for me, that was seeing domestic violence emergencies all day, every day, and then criminal cases when those orders were violated. But a lot of other people don't have the benefit of coming to domestic violence because you got a new job. But I have 2 daughters and 2 sons, and for similar reasons, I care very much about domestic violence. I want my boys to know what normal looks like as a father and a husband. I want my girls to know never to settle for less either. So again, I'd say, especially to young people, Maura, if you're in a relationship where you're suffering physical or mental or emotional abuse, if someone's not treating you with respect, that's not love, and you deserve better than that. But thank you for the opportunity to talk about it today, and congratulations. Good luck on your road to Eagle.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge Cerdo, for coming in and talking to me and Abdul about Crime Stoppers and the criminal justice system. Next up, we will be talking to Prosecutor Ryan Mears and what programs and initiatives he is working on to help keep people out of the criminal justice program. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Maura Sparks, and next to me is Abdul Hakim Shabazz. We're back in the studio talking about crime prevention in our communities in support of Crime Stoppers of Central Indiana. Earlier today, we've talked to a lot of political and community leaders, and now we're going to be talking to Prosecutor Ryan Mears. After completing law school, Prosecutor Mears immediately began his career in public service at the Marion County Prosecutor's Office. During his 12 years as a deputy prosecutor, Prosecutor Mears had tried more than 100 jury and bench trials. As chief trial deputy in the prosecutor's office, Prosecutor Mears has championed reform and set new expectations for the criminal justice system in Marion County. He coordinated the July 2019 Second Chance Workshop, bringing together prosecutor's office staff, nonprofit organizations, and pro bono attorneys to serve individuals interested in expungement and reinstated suspended driver's license. Prosecutor Mears has also drawn together agency support for community programs such as laundry and more on the city's far east side.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
You're welcome, and thank you for coming in to help me with my project.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to be about it, and I appreciate your engagement on these particular issues.
So I do have a couple questions for you today. So the first one is, what made you want to get involved in the criminal justice program?
I think the biggest thing for me is you want to have an impact on your community and a positive impact on your community. And so I always think back to my mom and my dad growing up. My mom was a teacher, and she loved going to work every single day and loved the fact that 10 years later she'd meet someone who would say, "Hey, you taught me how to read." And then, my dad was in insurance, which was a career and a job, but I don't think he got that same level of enjoyment that my mom had out of it. And it was because she was able to really give back to her community. And that really left a mark on me. And so I knew I was going to get into public service. And when I came out of law school, I was either going to work at the public defender agency or the prosecutor's office. And I was fortunate to work at the prosecutor's office. I love this opportunity because we get the opportunity to help stand up for people who cannot stand up for themselves. and we help bring justice for victims. We hopefully also have a positive impact on the community and make the community a better place. There's a lot of challenges in our community right now, and the Marion County Prosecutor's Office is uniquely positioned to deal with a lot of those challenges and help address some of those challenges. And so it just feels good every day knowing that at the end of the day, you've made your community a better place, hopefully.
That's very interesting that you started out learning from your parents and going under their shadow, especially with your mom, about being a teacher and everything.
Yeah, she was a great inspiration to me, and I appreciate the fact that she really emphasized to both me and my sister. My sister's a prosecutor as well. She really emphasized to us the importance of public service and giving back to your community, and don't necessarily pursue things for financial reasons or other reasons. Make sure you're doing what you truly love, and hopefully you love to help people, and hopefully you want to make that difference in your community. And I'm grateful that I learned those lessons from my mom.
In June, you also made headlines in the news when you changed how you deal with the juveniles that have low-level nonviolent crimes. Can you tell me about the Juvenile Second Chance program?
Absolutely, and I appreciate you asking about it. One of the things that we've dealt with is young people involved in the criminal justice system, and we're constantly looking for ways of what can we do better and what can we do to make sure that we never see this person again. And what we found with young people is when they have that initial contact with the criminal justice system, when they have that initial contact with the judge, their likelihood of success decreases exponentially, which told me we're not necessarily doing everything right when we encounter people, in particular low-level offenders. What resources can we offer people, and how can we hopefully get them down a better track? And so I was actually just working at the Boys and Girls Club, the Finish Line Boys and Girls Club at 38th and Post, and I was talking to Eric Davenport, who runs that facility, and he said, as we were sitting in there, he said, the people who come here every day are not the ones who are out here committing crimes, and they're not the ones who are out here involved in violence. And so we just out of that kind of organic conversation, I was like, okay, well, what can we do to drive kids to the Boys and Girls Club? How can we get them involved? And it's a travesty, but it's the truth. There are far too many people who can't have access to the Boys and Girls Club because they can't afford the $25 a month membership fee. And so our thought process and our message we wanted to send to the community and young people as a whole is, if you've been arrested on a low-level offense, I want to invest in you. I want to say, these are the things that I think you can do to help realize your potential. What can we do to get you in a positive environment, a structured environment where you have access to reliable internet, because a lot of kids don't, where you have access to information about nutrition and health, which a lot of kids don't necessarily get. And also we can make sure that you stay active because of all the sports programs they have there. And so it seemed like a win for everybody involved. And I'd much rather spend that money trying to help kids as opposed to prosecuting them.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. You want to tell them that somebody is interested in keeping them safe, because a lot of the kids who are in the system most of the time don't have that family value and that saying that somebody is looking out for you, having an eye over your shoulder.
That's such a great point. And I think back to my own life and my parents, and I think about all the times that I failed and my parents were there to help pick me up and help get me through challenging times. And a lot of kids don't have that. And so this is maybe sometime for some kids the first time anybody's believed in them or anybody's given them the benefit of the doubt. And I think that's a powerful message to send to kids and young people. And the last thing I want is for a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old to think that we as a community have given up on them. And I think a lot of times when you just put them in the criminal justice system, that's sometimes the message that we send. And so if it's a low-level nonviolent offense, meaning they're not hurting anybody else, I think it's really important that we try to think to ourselves, okay, what can we do to best help this child? What can we do to put this kid in a better position than they were otherwise? And that's really what we try to focus on. And I appreciate your point on that.
Brian, obviously when we look at crime and crime prevention, we have sort of the short-term and the long-term approach. What is your office doing in sort of in the short run to sort of help mitigate, maybe like I said, with the one program with the Boys and Girls Club, getting kids on the right direction so they don't come back when they're 18, 19 years old, having committed a serious felony that requires a lot more resources and unfortunately a lot more prison time?
Yeah, and so really what we're looking to do is, okay, what can we do to help? And these really started with just community conversations. And so when I talk to people who are coming out of the system, What can we do to help? The three things that I talk about or I heard most was, what can you do to help me with my felony conviction? Because it's prevented me from either being employed or I'm underemployed. It's also been, we have a terrible issue of housing discrimination for people who have felony convictions. I can't get to and from work because I don't have a driver's license because I never bothered to get one. And I'm jammed up on my child support obligations. And so what we did is we said, okay, we're going to put together these second chance fairs, which you referenced when you introduced me, where we have people come in and we say, okay, we're going to help you get this criminal conviction taken off your record. Why is that important? Because it's holding you back from getting a job, or it's holding you back from housing. We agreed to an expungement the other day with someone who is building a $350,000 house. And he said, as I'm building this house, I cannot rent because I have this prior felony conviction. He said, how is this making the community better or safer? And he told me, he said, I'm okay with doing the time. I just didn't know it was going to be a life sentence. And so those are the conversations that you have where you realize we can have a positive impact to hopefully help people move forward so we don't see them again in the criminal justice system. And it's the same thing with the driver's licenses. People get their license suspended a lot of times because they can't afford to pay a traffic ticket, not because they're bad drivers. They just didn't have the $160. And so we try to work with those individuals, get their license reinstated so they're driving on the road safely. And it's the same thing with child support. There's a lot of people who owe money on their child support. They get their driver's license suspended. And we try to create an environment where we tell people, okay, you come in and you help start paying on your child support obligation. I'm going to reinstate your driver's license because I want you to be involved in your child's life. I want you to be able to get to work. And what we found is that people have begin to increase their level of payments when they participate in those programs. And my big thing is if you give young people hope and opportunity, they don't commit crimes. And if you get people working, they're certainly not committing violent crimes. And that's really what we're trying to do to hopefully do some of this crime prevention.
So this affects the juveniles that are in the system. But how does this impact the juveniles that are in the communities that do have a significantly higher crime rate?
Right, and I think that's what is the intentional engagement for young people. We're working on a program right now where we're actually partnering up with an advertising company where we're going to put billboards around the city where young people are the ones who are creating the message about violence. And so what I've found when I talk to young people is, they don't consume media the same way maybe I do, or Abdul's pretty advanced, so he's on Twitter and Instagram and everything else, and so he's probably right with the young people. But how do you reach young people in a positive way and get them to be able to effectively talk about an issue like violence in our community, and what can we do to help prevent violence from occurring amongst young people? And so that's really a constant conversation. And so what we started was our youth fellowship program to have those conversations. And it's not only conversations about violence in our community, but what's the best way to reach someone who's in high school with you to have that conversation about violence? How can we create a message that's going to catch your attention and get you engaged? But then the follow-up of it is when we do that, when we do catch your attention, what does that programming look like that we offer? And again, it's driven and designed by young people because I think it's really important. When I talk to young people, they say, here's the problem. Adults never listen to kids. And so I want to take away that excuse and say, okay, we're going to do this program. And we're going to do it because you told me this is what young people want to see, or this will get young people involved. And we do that through our youth violence prevention fellows. And I think that's hopefully a positive way to have interactions with people. And so we're starting this initiative with the billboard campaign, which again is I want young people to start having that conversation about violence. Why are so many young people involved in violent crime? Why do we see so many young people being victims of violent crime? And how can we better reach one another when it relates to that topic? And so that's just a couple of the ways we're trying to hopefully make some progress on that issue.
And it'll also be able to change throughout the generations to come because it will be led by the kids too.
You running for prosecutor?
No.
Okay. You seem like you know what's going on. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I mean that's the hope and that's the goal with what we're trying to do here.
So how are organizations like Crime Stoppers Essential Indiana significant to the communities where crime is significantly higher?
I think the biggest thing is, and it's not just Crime Stoppers, it's all these different community organizations. I mean, they have their pulse on what's going on in their community. They know what their community needs. And I think we in government or anybody who's in a position of leadership needs to do a better job of listening to the community. When I have a conversation with someone in the community, my first question is always the first thing is, how can I help? And I think that's where you need to start with all of these issues. You can't come to the table pretending like we have the answers. It doesn't work that way. The community doesn't serve us. We serve the community. And so it's really important that we have our hand out and we say, these are the things that we're going to do to try to help. But what we're doing, what we think we're doing to help was driven by the feedback that we got from the community. And that's why those community-based organizations are so critically important to hopefully putting a dent in what I think everybody would agrees is just unacceptable numbers.
Brian, how does your office and the whole public safety infrastructure just deal with the aftermath of, like I said, broken homes, kids in trouble? How do you sleep at night?
Well, I sleep at night because I get the opportunity to work with fantastic people, and I've met with people who have just gone through some of the most difficult and trying experiences any of us could imagine. And I see the dignity and grace that they carry themselves with. And it's like, well, I don't really have much to complain about. And we can learn a lot from those individuals. But what we have seen is that there's a lot of side effects to that as it relates to trauma and how that trauma impacts the community. And so I think one of the areas where we can make real progress is, in particular with young people, is if they have witnessed violence, if someone close to them has been a victim of violence, that has a real impact on that person. And so what can we do to try to help treat that trauma that individual's been through? Because I think the studies have shown that if you are a witness to violence, you are more likely to be involved in violence in the future, and the numbers are not close. And so I think it's important for us as a community, okay, what can we do to wrap our arms around these people who have unfortunately been either a victim or a witness to violence and have experienced violence firsthand? What can we do to address that underlying trauma? And I mean, I think that involves the schools. I think that involves the health department. It involves everybody in our community. But this is an issue that I think just now we're really starting to get a handle on. This is going to have a tremendous impact on someone moving forward. And it's also a tremendous indicator that they are probably more likely to be involved in violence in the future.
I know the prosecutor's office and all these community shelters are with groups of people helping the children avoid crime. But how can we as individuals, or me as a 17-year-old, help prevent crime in communities or help give communities a safer outlet?
That's such a great question. And I think the number one is just being willing to help. Is super important. And I think it's everything from small things. When we look at certain areas of our community, don't say to yourself, oh, this is a dangerous area, I can't go there, because you can't help people if you're afraid of them. And so what investments are we able to make? And when I say investments, are you willing to have lunch in maybe a side of town you wouldn't ordinarily go to? Are you willing to shop at a store maybe you wouldn't ordinarily patronage? I mean, those are just small things that we can do to help try to bridge that gap, but also demonstrate that we want to make investments in these community, and I'm going to do that individually. And I think the other thing too is just we work with so many nonprofit groups and community-based organizations who are trying to do a great job. I'll give you you mentioned Laundry and More, who we've partnered up with in the past. At 42nd and Post every Tuesday, they do laundry for people, and it literally costs you 50 cents to do it. And so if you're willing to contribute 50 cents to Laundry and More, you just did a little laundry for somebody. And when you go and you see kids, I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, and when I go and I see kids who are 4 years old who have waited a week or two before their parents are able to do laundry because they don't have the financial resources to do it, and you see kind of some of the tough challenges that those young kids face, it can't help but make you realize, number one, how fortunate you are, but number two, just helping people meet basic needs and basic necessities is part of the problem. And so 50 cents goes a long way because you're going to help someone do their laundry, and you're going to help someone get clean clothes. And so I hope people understand the barrier to entry to help is literally 50 cents. And so I think that's what people just need to focus on, is every little bit helps if we get it to the right people who are working directly with people in the community.
So I don't have any more questions. Abdul, do you have any more?
We're all good.
I've never heard that before. Bill doesn't have any more questions.
Oh, this is her show.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Prosecutor Mears, for coming in and talking about the criminal justice system and how we can have an effect in it. When we get back, we're going to be talking to crime beat reporter Scoop Jefferson about crime in our community and how it is affecting people to report crime. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Maura Sparks, and this is an awareness campaign for crime prevention in our community in support of Crime Stoppers of Central Indiana. Next to me is Abdul Hakim Shabazz, and with us this afternoon is the crime beat reporter Steve Scoop Jefferson. All right, so hello, Scoop.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing fine.
Good.
You know,
Abdul treating you right?
Yes.
Okay, good.
You know, you and I have known each other for almost 20 years. I think it's the first time I've actually interviewed you.
That's right.
Oh my gosh.
You're absolutely right.
I'm saying
I'm going to hold on to the table. Here we go.
All right, let's do this. So, reporter Scoop Jefferson joined the 13 News team in June 2002. Steve's news experience includes reporting and anchoring at TV and radio stations in Ohio, Georgia, South Carolina, Mississippi, and Oregon. He has countless prodigies working across the country in the media who he has mentored from college to the workforce. Steve, affectionately known as Scoop J, is an Emmy Award-winning reporter with numerous other awards, including Edward R. Murrow Best Newscast for the Associated Press and various community service awards. He's reported on major events, including the Atlanta bombings, 100 Million Man March, the Georgia floods, and Hurricane George and Katrina. Steve has served on several board of directors and volunteers with several community organizations, including Grace Apostolic. Church in Indy, the Indianapolis Press Club Foundation, Center for Leadership and Development, and Crime Stoppers of Central Indiana. So I went through some stuff. How about you tell us some stuff about you?
Well, I'm originally from Dayton, Ohio. I have a twin sister. I always wanted to be a scout, but didn't get the opportunity to. So that's why this is so important to me. I get to meet a scout like you.
Thank you. Abdul, do you have anything to say?
So how'd you end up covering crime? Because obviously, usually when we started our careers as reporters, we were sort of the general assignment reporter. Then you sort of find your niche, whether it's local government, public safety, more the human feature stuff. How'd you end up covering crime?
Well, I was actually working in Portland, Oregon as a general assignment reporter, as you mentioned. And I told my agent I wanted to get back to the Midwest. And so we started sending out my resume tape for general assignment reporter jobs, and we really did not get any hits at all. And then he came up with the idea. He said, let's market you as a crime reporter, because I was covering a lot of crime out in Portland, Oregon with the riots and just different crime cases out there. And so once we started doing that, I started getting job offers. And the best job offer was here in Indianapolis at WTHR. They recruited me as their crime reporter to cover the crime beat.
All right. So as a crime reporter, how does the community react when you talk about a news story or a big crime story?
When you cover the police and when you cover crime, and I'm sure, Abdul, you're going to attest to this, you meet people on the worst day of their life because something bad has happened to them. And I always tell people, I really appreciate when people give me the opportunity to tell their story as a victim, because they're hoping, they're looking for justice, they're looking for answers, they're hoping that somebody will be held responsible, possibly for something that's bad happened to them. Covering crime is usually when I knock on your door, something bad has happened. But by the same token, I've knocked on people's door and they said, we were just trying to figure out how to get in contact with you because we need help. We need justice.
And that is a good outlet because they do want to get their story out. Like if it's a missing person or an abduction, they want people to hear, hey, this is what's happening. And for you being a reporter for crime, that also helps get the word out to keep people aware of everything that is going on in the community.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I appreciate the opportunity to let people know when they're safety is at risk, or the opportunity to tell them, this is what you need to do to help keep your family safe. This is what you need to do to help keep your kids safe. Whether it's a stranger in the neighborhood or a series of burglaries in the neighborhood, to be able to tell people, hey, heads up, something's happening, pay attention. That I consider that a ministry as part of my job.
So why did you want to become a crime reporter?
To help people, to be able to give people a voice. There was a couple of months ago, a mom whose son was murdered last December, and they arrested one person, but they didn't arrest the 3 other people that police knew were involved, and there were warrants for their arrests. And 6 months have gone by, and the other 3 were still out in the public. They were still at large. In fact, she used to see them on social media, and she called me and said, would you mind doing a story on what happened to my son? We did a story, put the names of the other 3 suspects who were wanted for her son's death. And they were arrested within 24 hours because somebody picked up the phone and called Crime Stoppers anonymously and said, I know where these guys are. Here's where you can find them. And it just brought so much more peace to that mom's life that her son's accused killers are now behind bars.
When you cover crime scene, I always wonder, how do you keep yourself almost sort of emotionally detached? Because obviously if you let every murder, every sad story get to you, you'll be, locked in a place somewhere. So how do you keep yourself emotionally detached from what you have to cover as a crime reporter?
Yeah, when we were in school, we were trained that whatever you do as a journalist, don't get attached. Don't get involved, but keep that distance. And that's hard to do when you're talking to people and they're pouring out their heart to you in an interview. One of the things that I do when I approach a crime story, I put myself in everybody's shoes that's involved in that story, whether it's the detective, the victim, the suspect, and I try to tell that story as fair as possible because you only get one chance. Once it goes out on the air, you can't recall it. But I approach it as a ministry. How can I help this person who has had something bad happen to them? And sometimes it's good stuff. Sometimes, I learned that a police officer has spent their own money to take a family groceries that he came across. Sometimes it's those good stories which add balance to all the bad stuff too. So I kind of approach it as a ministry and not as a job.
Because I feel like you don't want to just be put up a face and not be attached. You can't get overly attached, but as a reporter, there has to be some sort of emotion so you can show the victims, I'm doing this because I want to help.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
What do you think is the most significant impact that one of your stories has had on the community, if you can share that?
Wow. I think it was one of the things, one story that I did was a young man who was in prison for attempted murder. And his mom called me and said, hey, my son's in jail. He's facing attempted murder charges. He was facing anywhere from 6 to 20 years. And you get a lot of those calls as a reporter. I'm sure you do too.
Yep, all the time.
My kid is innocent. Everybody's kid is innocent. But for some reason, I believed her, and I asked her to send me names and telephone numbers of his friends, and I talked to his friends and said, Steve, you got to help because he's not that type of guy. After doing my own little investigation on it, I found out that his name was Keith Wilson, that he was in a lineup that was shown to the victim along with another guy named Keith Wilson, and they looked alike. And so I went and visited the victim. I took both pictures. I said, which one of these guys is the guy that tried to kill you? And he picked out the real perpetrator. The other Keith Wilson was sitting in jail over Thanksgiving. And then I started making calls to the detective, the prosecutor, and eventually to Judge Mark Stoner, of Marion County Superior Court. And I said, you guys got the wrong Keith Wilson in jail. Well, I went to the real Keith Wilson, the real suspect's house, and met him. and he came to the door with a gun, but fortunately I was able to get away from there and not get hurt. But eventually they let the Keith Wilson that was in jail out of jail to be with his family by Christmas. And that story just basically epitomizes what we do as journalists, helping people find justice and helping, in many cases, right the wrongs that people experience.
How important is an organization like Crime Stoppers with the job that you do?
Oh, it is. Oh my God, it is gold when it comes to covering crime, because what Crime Stoppers allows people to do is to actually pick up the phone and give information anonymously, and that's what I love about the organization and got so involved in it, because no one has ever been identified calling the tip line. And then on top of that, you can get a cash reward. I mean, everybody needs cash, right? I mean, even rich people still like cash. Even people with, a 900 credit score, they still want cash in their pocket. But allowing people to make that telephone call anonymously is priceless. And it's so important that everyone who has information about a crime that can be solved feel comfortable to be able to pick up the phone and call and know that that telephone call will not come back on them.
Why is it so important to make connections with law enforcement and communities, not just as a reporter, but as an individual in the community?
It helps build up trust. I mean, if it's just like being a police officer, if the community doesn't trust you, they're not going to talk to you. They're not going to accept you in their neighborhood. They're not going to befriend you. So it's important to have those relationships. And relationships is everything, no matter what profession you're in. But when it comes to crime, having a relationship to be able to solve crime, be able to help victims, you got to be able to come to the table and people see you as a person and not just as a journalist, not just as a police officer, not just as someone with Crime Stoppers looking to make sure their stats are good.
And I feel like one of the important things as being a reporter, the people don't have to be scared of getting shunned or called out from the other people involved in crime in the communities, because you also aren't law enforcement. Because there is that fear in people, I don't want to be called a snitch because I went to the police.
Right, exactly. And that's one of the that's one of the stereotypes we got to tear down in our communities, that calling Crime Stoppers means you're a snitch. No, it means you care. Mm-hmm. It means you want to help and you want to be part of the solution and not the problem.
Well, thank you, Scoop, for coming in today and giving us that insight with Crime Reporter and the crime in communities and what we as individuals can do and the importance of reporting and telling people your stories about crime to help keep our community safer.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. and congratulations on your accomplishments.
Thank
as a Girl
you
Scout.
Very much.
All right.
Abdul, any last words?
No, my friend, appreciate you stopping by. Nothing but the best luck with your future endeavors.
Thank you.
Nothing but the best, my friend.
Thank you.
All right. Well, next up, we're going to be talking to Lieutenant Shane Foley of the Impd. Hello again, everyone, to my crime prevention awareness campaign for my Eagle Scout project in support of Crime Stoppers of Central Indiana. Right today in the studio, I am talking with Lieutenant Shane Foley of the Impd. Lieutenant Foley is in his 14th year as a police officer on the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department. He's spent most of his career on the street on East District and was most recently assigned to recruit training and currently supervises the Public Affairs Office. So, Lieutenant Foley, I have a few questions for you today. My first question is, why is Crime Stoppers important to law enforcement?
It's important for a couple of reasons. First of all, a lot of people who have information, they don't feel comfortable maybe providing that to the police. So it provides an avenue for them to provide that information anonymously. Some of that information we wouldn't get otherwise. So that information can be used by detectives. Typically, it's our homicide. Most importantly, I guess, our homicide and aggravated assault detectives, but also people who are victims of theft from a house. We get a ring video and we share that with the public. And maybe it's the neighbor of the suspect and they don't want to be identified as who that person is, but all we need is a name. So that's incredibly important to provide citizens with an avenue to provide information where they can feel safe in doing that. And then hopefully through those steps, we make the city and our community safer.
So how does anonymous information help the law enforcement do their job? Because I know in court you do need evidence and witnesses. So how does the anonymous tips come into play?
Yeah, sometimes it's just something to get us on the right track. Maybe it's something like I was saying, an auto theft suspect, and we have a picture of them, and we don't know who it is, but somebody calls in anonymously and says it's Johnny Smith, and we're able to identify who Johnny Smith is. We go to his house, and through other investigative means, we identify, hey, there's 10 stolen cars in Johnny's backyard. We don't necessarily need the information from the identifier information of the person who originally called. Now, sometimes it does get us into a trick bag where somebody gives us information, say it's Johnny Smith, and Johnny Smith doesn't have any cars in his backyard. So it is sometimes important that people contact us directly. But if there's no other option, we'll take the information anonymously over not having information at all.
So Crime Stoppers doesn't affect law enforcement and people in crimes, but how can it also help connect the law enforcement to their community?
Sure. I mean, sometimes people want to be engaged with the police. They want to have some type of participation in reducing crime without necessarily having a direct contact with us. So being able to reach out to Crime Stoppers and share information about drug dealing in their neighborhood, thefts, or violent crime or anything else allows them to participate in that process without being considered a snitch, if you will, or being looked down upon by others in the community.
How can we as a community help the crime rate in the communities? Yeah, also through Crime Stoppers, but like as individuals in the community.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is how can members of the community participate in reducing crime in general? There's a lot of ways. I mean, certainly it's calling 911 when criminal activity is taking place. Being aware of your surroundings. Sometimes people call and say, well, there's a suspicious person walking down the street. Well, what makes them suspicious? Is it just they're walking down the street, or is it they're going up to houses, to every house, and they're looking through windows? Well, those are different pieces of information. So knowing how to report crime is important. This can't be, stated enough, but teaching responsibility to our kids and to our youth, and to help them grow up to be responsible individuals and accountable people, to teach them not to solve conflict with violence, but find other avenues. Too often we're finding that people just have simple conflict disturbances and they're resulting to guns to solve those conflicts. And then I think another thing is just supporting the police. Our officers are out there working hard every single day, and there's a lot of critique of policing these days, and I think it would be really helpful for our officers to just get that boost of support from the community, to know that the community is behind them.
So a couple questions for the viewers today. Does Impd control Crime Stoppers?
No. Impd is a completely separate entity, separate organization. We don't supervise. We don't have any control over what they do. And that's important because in order to keep that anonymity, and people feel uncomfortable that they are contacting Crime Stoppers without IMPD knowing who they are, that's pretty important.
So how does law enforcement feel about working with nonprofits like Crime Stoppers?
We've got excellent relationship with a lot of different nonprofits, and there's a lot of our community organizations are nonprofits. The Indy Public Safety Foundation, which provides us with a good amount of financial support, is a nonprofit organization. Policing, I think, has found that there's only so much we can do as government to advance the profession and advance our goals. That nonprofit organizations, whether it's Crime Stoppers, the Indy Public Safety Foundation, or some of the other community organizations, are really instrumental in being partners with the police department to help achieve our objectives of making the city safer, making our citizens feel safer, and then ultimately making Indianapolis a better place to live.
So, how would me as an individual, as a high schooler who's 17, how could I help people in the community avoid crime, or what organizations are there for people like me to avoid crime?
Well, I mean, I think avoiding crime should be pretty easy. I mean, don't commit it, right?
No, yeah.
But there's other ways for people to be involved in the community. Getting involved with some of the neighborhood organizations, getting involved with the police, athletic activities opportunity. We have the Indy Public Safety Foundation sponsors the junior cadets and the cadet programs, which allow people to kind of have youth and people who just finished high school to have avenues towards understanding what the police department does and law enforcement, and then potentially actually being a police officer. I mean, I don't want to understate that enough, that we are hiring, we are recruiting, and somebody who's 17 might know somebody who's a little bit older and wants to be the police. I would certainly think that somebody who wants to have an impact on crime will think of being a police officer. It's such a rewarding profession.
Well, thank you, Lieutenant Foley, for coming in today on behalf of the IMPD to talk about the involvement of Crime Stoppers that Crime Stoppers has with the IMPD. Next, we're talking to the Chief Deputy of the Marion County Sheriff's Office, Reggie Roney, about how Crime Stoppers helps the Mcso's mission to serve the public. Hello, everyone, to the last part of my awareness campaign for crime prevention and communities in support of Crime Stoppers of Central Indiana. The last person we will be talking to today is Chief Deputy Roney of the Marion County Sheriff's Office. With over 50 years of service to the people of Marion County, Chief Deputy Roney serves as second in command of the Marion County Sheriff's Office. Chief Deputy began his career with the Mcso on January 1st, 1970, after returning home from the U.S. Army. The chief has served in several capacities and ranks within our agency, at one point even supervising Sheriff Forstall. He was named Road Deputy of the Year in 1986. Chief Deputy is an 1989 graduate of the FBI Leadership Academy. He also attended the Southern Police Institute for Homicide School and the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center for Police Management. All right, so thank you again today for coming in and talking to me for my awareness campaign. I do have a couple questions for you today. So the first question is, how does Crime Stoppers assist Mcso in its mission to serve the public?
The Marion County Sheriff's Office is responsible for, among other things, serving all criminal warrants in Marion County and checking on all registered sex offenders and violent crime offenders. In those two areas, Crime Stoppers is invaluable. The public calls in thousands of tips every year, and each one about the whereabouts of someone with a warrant. We check into all those calls, which have resulted in several arrests every year. We have been doing weekly briefings about a wanted sex offender. And so far this year, the Crime Stoppers tips have led to the arrest of 3 of those offenders.
That is very interesting. Thank you. How does anonymous information help MCSO create a better jail and find people with warrants?
Well, the sad reality is that people are often afraid of reprisal if they report on the whereabouts of someone that is wanted. So this gives it a chance to safely provide tips to law enforcement by doing so anonymously to a non-law enforcement agency. That way we get criminals off the street and make it safer for everyone.
Making it safer for everybody because people are worried when they are supposed to report because they're scared that somebody is gonna hurt them or their loved ones. So that is a good outlet for those people to have a safe outlet because it is anonymous. So
yeah, unfortunately, in the community, sometimes it's not popular to tell on somebody else, especially if you're a family member or a neighbor or something like that. So it's safer to do it this way.
Mm-hmm. So as we know, MCSO does have many responsibilities. So why do you think, as the sheriff, why do you think MCSO still invests in Crime Stoppers?
Well, it's a proven commodity. Crime Stoppers is proven to be an effective tool in the fight against crime. We value our partnership with them, and it makes the way safer. It makes our community safer, a safer place to live and to work.
So what is your involvement through Crime Stoppers? Because Crime Stoppers is a nonprofit organization. What does the Marion County Sheriff's Office do through Crime Stoppers?
Well, Crime Stoppers is an independent entity, and we recognize that, and it's important because it gives people faith that when they make a report, it truly is anonymous. You're not actually calling a police officer or a deputy to give a tip to. You're calling in, you're getting a anonymous number, and everything is dealt with anonymously.
How does the MCSO feel about working with nonprofits like Crime Stoppers?
Well, we value Crime Stoppers so much that we actually pay for a full-time sergeant to just help staff the Crime Stoppers office. So any opportunity to work with a group that is promoting safer communities is one we'll take.
As individuals that are in the community, what can we do to help prevent like juveniles getting involved in crime, or how can we help people get out of crime?
Well, first thing you can do is they say, see something, report it. Don't, think somebody else is going to report it, because it could just get worse at that point. It's each and every one of our duty as citizens to report crimes as we see them.
Thank you very much for coming in today and to talk with me for my campaign for my Eagle project. Next up, we are going to talk to Abdul and Dan Rosenberg about everything that we went over today with all the guests, and to talk over just an overview of everything, and just to remind you guys what Crime Stoppers can do to help. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the very last part of my campaign for crime prevention in communities through Crime Stoppers of Central Indiana. This has been an exciting day, and I have learned a lot, and I feel like our viewers have learned a lot about crime prevention in communities and what organizations are out there to help prevent crime. So, Abdul, is there anything that you want to go over and re-explain to our viewers?
Well, I think one thing that's important for our audience to know is that to solve our crime problem, it takes everybody working together. It takes police, prosecutors, it takes our court system, public defenders, our community groups, the whole 9 yards, Crime Stoppers, obviously. And so by working together, you'll never be able to eliminate your crime problem, but you can mitigate it, keep it under control. So that's really important for people to realize that we're all working together to have as crime-free a society as humanly possible.
And I feel like this broadcast is a great example of how somebody in high school, a 17-year-old, can go out there and make a difference, because we have to work as a unit. It can't just be one person saying, hey, this is happening. We all have to help and put forth our volunteering to help and get the word out about these organizations. Because a lot of people don't know about Crime Stoppers or about other shelters that are there to help. I know some people think we're not doing anything, but because we are doing something, but it takes more people to make a change.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. It's a team game. Mm-hmm. It really is. Our founding fathers were such smart people. They divided power. They came up with legislatures and presidents and Supreme Courts and things like that. But they also knew that the government worked best and our society works best when it's working together and doing its job. And that takes everybody, the citizens. It takes the 17-year-olds. It takes all of us really deciding to be a part of the solution. So yeah, I think you've really hit on something there. I think that it takes judges and police and the Abduls of the world,
community shelters,
that's right.
reporters, everybody.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Otherwise, we always miss something. Mm-hmm. We're always missing one little ingredient, and a lot of times that's why we're not as successful as we should be.
And we understand that it's not a perfect system, and we're humans. We make mistakes, but to have people back us up and have multiple people saying the same things, that's what's gonna make it. It's like when you're in class and a teacher repeats the same sentence and the same statement over and over again.
That means it's probably going to be on the test.
It's going to be important. It's going to be important, and it's an important aspect.
Sure, absolutely. I think that when I think about your project, mm-hmm. I think that it's that little piece of the puzzle that's about communication and information that sometimes is one of the most important aspects, because you never know what you don't know, right?
Mm-hmm. Because people assume.
That's right. So, I think this is it helps in so many different ways. Yes, Crime Stoppers is going to benefit, which is great. But we also hope that people out there can benefit as well, because they're learning something.
All right. Well, I just want to give a big thank you for everybody who came in today, Crime Stoppers, and everybody else who came in today to talk about the preventions and the differences that we're putting forth to continue to help make our community safer. I also want to thank Edge Media Studios for letting us come in and record all this. I know it's been a long couple of days, but we got through and we're good. I also want to thank Abdul for coming in and helping me co-host.
Great job, kid.
I also want to thank everybody who took their time out of the day to come and watch us and actually hear the message that we're trying to send. That's not just one person who can make a difference, but it's a community. We're a unit. We're a team. Thank you again for everybody coming to help support my project. And
well done.
Good job.
Thank you.
Good job.